Welcome to the unit Dollar Merchandise Plan and 6-month Merchandise Plan. In this unit, we gain an in-depth understanding of merchandise planning process. This unit comprises of 2 modules and a final review section that invites you to reflect on what you have learned. By the end of this unit, students will be able to understand the planning process from the elements of planning to 6-month merchandise plan. Understand 6-month merchandise plan. Understand open to buy OTB planning systems. Examine factors affecting real-time OTB. This module outlines the dollar merchandise plan. The dollar merchandise plan is a guide for futuristic period and includes monetary values only. It does not describe units, assortments or quantities of the merchandise. It balances planned sales and planned stocks in monetary values. It includes cash discount. These are the discounts allowed by the vendors for payments of invoices prior to a specified date. Then stock turnover. It is the net sales divided by average inventory at retail. Then we have shortage. This is the difference between book inventory in retail dollars and physical inventory at retail, stated as a percentage of net sales. Average stock. This can be calculated using the beginning of the month inventories divided by the number of months of the period. Initial markup percent. This is the difference between the cost of merchandise and the original retail price. Gross margin percent. This is the difference between the net sales and total merchandise costs. The key elements of merchandise plan are: 1. Planned sales. This is the sales in monetary values estimates for the total plan period broken down for each month of the plan period. 2. Planned stock. It is the estimated money value of the inventory needed at the beginning of each month of the plan period. Stock turnover is equal to net sales in terms of value divided by the average inventory value. 3. Planned markdowns. Planned markdowns are the estimated reductions in terms of monetary values from the retail value of the goods for each month of the plan. Markdown percentage is equal to markdown in value divided by the net sales in value. Then the fourth one is planned purchases. It is the difference between what is needed and what is on hand. Estimated money to be spent for purchases for each month of the plan period. Planned purchases is equal to planned monthly sales plus planned end of the month stock plus planned monthly markdowns minus planned beginning of the month stock. Then the fifth one is planning reductions. It is the lowering or marking down of the retail price of the merchandise. Reductions are planned because only rarely can all the merchandise purchased be sold at the originally set retail price. Markdowns are either promotional or permanent, and these adjust the initial retail price downward temporarily or set a new retail price respectively. Markup cancellation. This can be done by adjusting the amount of markup that was put on an item originally, thereby lowering the retail price. There are 2 types of markups: keystone markup and short markup. Keystone markup is an amount that equals to the cost of merchandise. It involves doubling of the cost price or 50% retail markup percent. Short percentage markup is less than keystone markup. Open to buy OTB is used as a control device to see what purchases are made according to the merchandise plan and the needs exceeds the merchandise available. OTB is planned sales plus planned end of the month stock minus present inventory minus goods on order. Controls. There are methods employed to help a retailer track the business to see how it is doing and how effective the merchandising strategies are. Standards. Effective control systems have established standards, a means of measuring performance through accepted guidelines that help to monitor the performance. So, periodic inventory control. It is a method of stock control in which the retailer physically counts merchandise at designated time periods. Then we have perpetual inventory control. It is a stock control method that provides a continuous record of movement of incoming and outgoing merchandise. Vendor matrix and key resource lists are based on the premise that fewer resources or suppliers are better than many. In order for the resources to be as beneficial to the retailer as possible. Merchandise management is the analysis, planning, acquisition, handling and control of the merchandise investments of a retail operation. Buyers working with senior management are responsible for dollar planning of the merchandise requirements. Inventory is a major investment that retailers make. Gross margin return on inventory GMROII incorporates into a single measure both inventory turnover and gross profit. Its formula is gross margin upon net sales multiplied by net sales upon average inventory at cost, that is equaling to gross margin upon average inventory at cost. Once planned sales for the period have been determined, the merchandiser manager can then use one of the four methods for planning dollars invested in stock. They are basic stock method, percentage variation method, the weeks supply method and stock to sales method. Let us now review each of these. Basic stock method BSM is a technique for planning dollar inventory investment that allows for a base stock level plus a variable amount of inventory that will increase or decrease at the beginning of each sale period in the same dollar amount as the period's expected sales. BSM can be calculated as follows. Average monthly sales is equal to total planned sales for the season upon number of months in season. Average stock for the season is equal to total planned sales for the season upon estimated inventory turnover for the season. Basic stock is equal to average stock for season is equal to total planned sales per season upon estimated inventory turnover for the season. Basic stock is equal to average stock for the season minus average monthly sales for the season. Beginning of the month BOM stock is equal to planned monthly sales plus basic stock. The basic stock method works best when a retailer has a low turnover rate or sales are erratic. Percentage variation method PVM is a technique for planning dollar inventory investments that assumes the percentage fluctuations in monthly stock from average stock should be half as great as the percentage fluctuations in monthly sales from average sales. It is computed as follows. BOM stock is equal to average stock for the season multiplied by 1 by 2 multiplied by 1 plus planned sales for the month upon average monthly sales. This method is used when the retailer has a high annual inventory turnover rate, that is 6 or more times per year. The weeks supply method WSM is a technique for planning dollar inventory investments that states that the inventory level should be set equal to a predetermined number of weeks supply, which is directly related to the desired rate of stock turnover. The WSM is calculated as follows. Number of weeks to be stocked is equal to the weeks in period upon stock turnover rate for the period. Average weekly sales is equal to estimated total sales for the period upon number of weeks in period. BOM stock is equal to average weekly sales multiplied by number of weeks to be stocked. This method is used by retailers where the inventories are planned on a weekly, not monthly basis, and where sales do not fluctuate substantially. Stock to sales method SSM is a technique for planning dollar inventory investments where the amount of inventory planned for the beginning of the month is a ratio obtained from trade associations or retailers' historical records of stock to sales. The dollars planned for merchandise need to be controlled, and this can be accomplished with a technique called open to buy or simply OTB. OTB refers to the dollar amount that a buyer can currently spend on the merchandise without exceeding the planned dollar stocks. OTB is calculated as follows. Planned sales for the month plus planned reductions for the month plus end of the month stock minus beginning of the month stock equals to planned sales at retail. This minus commitments at retail for the current delivery equals to open to buy at retail. The OTB should not be thought of as a fixed quantity that cannot exceeded when consumer needs arise. However, the changes in OTB should be rare. If there are frequent changes, then the sales planning process is flawed. Some common buying errors that cause problems with OTB include buying merchandise that is priced too high or too low for the store's target market, buying wrong type of merchandise or buying merchandise that is too trendy, having too much or too little basic stock on hand, buying from too many vendors, failing to identify season's hot items early enough in the season, failing to let the vendor assist the buyer by adding new items and or new colors to the retailer's merchandise mix. Merchandise planning is a dynamic process subject to many changes. It is important that to consider the implications that could arise in planning your stock levels as a result of sales for the previous month being lower or higher than the planned, reductions being either higher or lower than the planned, shipments of merchandise being delayed in transit. Understanding the consequences of each of these situations illustrates the relationship between merchandising activities and merchandise budget. The dollar merchandise plan is only starting point in merchandise management. Once the retailer has decided how many dollars can be invested in inventory, the dollar plan needs to be converted into an actual inventory plan. On the sales floor, items not dollars are sold. The assortment of items that will comprise the merchandise mix must then be planned. An optimal merchandise mix has three dimensions. Each dimension describes an aspect of the merchandise line. A merchandise line is a group of products that are closely related because they are intended for the same end use, or sold to the same customer group, or fall within a given price range. Today, some retailers manage categories or lines as a strategic business units. When using category management, buyers are no longer concerned with the gross margin return on investment GMROI of a single product. Instead, they manage GMROI for an entire line or category. A retailer's merchandise mix can, in addition to satisfying the customer wants, actually shape those wants and impact whether and what customer purchase. Therefore, just as the trading areas for each store in a chain are different, the optimal mix will be different for every store. There are four constraining factors that influence the design of optimal merchandise mix. They are dollar merchandise constraint, space constraint, merchandise turnover constraint, and market constraints. Dollar merchandise constraint. There seldom will be enough dollars to emphasize all three dimensions of variety, breadth, and depth. Space constraint. If depth or breadth is wanted, space is needed. If variety is to be stressed, enough empty space is needed to separate the distinct merchandise lines. Merchandise turnover constraint. As the depth of the merchandise increases, more and more variations of the product must be stocked to serve smaller segments. Thus, average turnover is likely to decrease. Market constraints. The above three dimensions have a profound effect on how the market perceives and the store and the customers the store will attract. Constraining factors will make it impossible to maximize all dimensions of the merchandise mix. However, if retailer is going to lose customers, it should lose the less profitable ones by properly mixing its merchandise in terms of variety, breadth, and depth within the dollar, space, turnover, and market constraints. After deciding the relative emphasis to be placed on three dimensions of merchandise mix, the retailer needs to decide when to order and reorder the desired merchandise line items. Ideally, a retailer would receive the ordered merchandise just as it is needed. When selling a seasonal item, the retailer would want to be completely sold out of the item on the planned out of stock date. Retailer tries to achieve optimal efficiency on its inventory dollars by closely monitoring its inventory using UPC or barcode data. Due to conflicts, unit stock planning is an exercise in compromise because everything cannot be stocked. Several conflicts are summarized here. Maintaining a strong in-stock position on genuinely new items while trying to avoid 90% new products that fall in the inventory stage. Maintain an adequate stock of the basic popular items while having sufficient inventory dollars to capitalize on unforeseen opportunities. Maintain high merchandise turnover goals while maintaining high margin goals. Maintain adequate selection for customers while not confusing them. Maintain space productivity and utilization while not congesting the store. This module focuses on the 6 months merchandising plan. Let us begin by examining the dimensions of merchandise planning. There are three basic steps. One is sales forecast, second, determining the merchandising requirements, third, merchandise control, the open to buy. Let us begin with step 1, the sales forecast. The projection of achievable sales revenue based on historical sales data, analysis of market surveys, and trends and salesperson's estimates is termed as sales forecasting. It is also called sales budget. A sales budget may be made by the merchandiser based on the targets given by the top management or may be handed down by the top management itself depending on the retail organization. Forecasts are typically developed to answer these questions. How much of each product will need to be purchased? Should new products be added to the merchandise assortments? What price should be charged for the product? Developing forecasts involves 4 steps. Reviewing of past sales, analyzing the economic conditions and the market opportunities, analyzing the changes in the marketing strategies of the retail organization and the competition, creating the sales forecast. These are the influences on the sales forecast process. The second step is determining the merchandising requirement. The merchandise budget is the first stage in the planning of merchandise. It is a financial plan which gives an indication of how much to invest in product inventories stated in monetary terms. The merchandise budget usually comprises of the sales plan, stock support plan, planned reductions, planned purchase levels, gross margins. Range plans are at the level of company and department level. The aim of the range plan is to create a balanced range for each category of products that the retailer chooses to offer. The process of range planning ensures that the goals of the merchandise plan fall into specific lines, many a times the stock keeping units. Good range planning should essentially ensure that sufficient number of items or options available to the customers, ensure that overbuying and underbuying is limited, and ensure that sufficient quantities of the product are available. The 6-month merchandise plan is a tool that translates the profit objective into a framework of merchandise planning and then control. The main objective of creating this plan is to prepare a month by month purchasing schedule for the retail organization. The primary objective of merchandise planning is profit improvement. As the buyer's plan for each department unfolds, you can get a better handle on potential profitability. You then have the opportunity to fine tune these plans, allowing investment dollars to be redistributed among the departments in order to achieve company goals and objectives. In preparing the 6-month merchandise plan, larger retail chains will build from the bottom up. Starting at the class level, each class of merchandise will have its own plan. Combining entire subclasses will give us strategy for each department. Taking that one step further, the amalgamation of all department strategies will give us the total company plan. In the case of an individual store, this will produce store's overall strategy. Here are the some points to be kept in mind. The merchandise budget should be prepared in advance of the selling season. The language of the budget should be easy to understand. Since the economy is ever changing and the merchandise budget must be planned for a relatively short period of time, 6 months is a normal norm. The budget should be flexible enough to make changes possible. The key components of 6-month merchandise plan are planned sales, planned purchases, planned reductions, planned markdowns, employee discounts, shrinkage, planned markup and gross margin. Let us learn about each of them now. Planned sales. Planned sales are the projected sales for the period that is planned. Planned purchases represent the merchandise that is to be purchased during any given period. Planned purchases are calculated by using the formula planned purchases are equal to planned sales plus planned reductions plus planned EOM minus planned BOM stock. Planned reductions, markdowns, employee discounts and inventory shrinkage come under the heading of a planned reductions. Planned markdowns are deductions in prices and may occur because of many reasons ranging from bad quality of merchandise, competitive products, change in the trends. Employee discounts. Employee discounts are given to the employees for buying the company's products. Shrinkage. Shrinkage is the loss of merchandise due to theft or pilferage. Planned markup. Planned markup vary depending on the type of product, the audience that it is targeted and the market trends. Markup in rupees is equal to selling price minus cost price. Gross margin. Gross margin is the difference between selling price and the cost of goods sold, less reductions for markdowns, shrinkage, employee discounts. To determine the gross margin for each month, all the purchases and inventories must be converted to cost price. Planning end of the month EOM or BOM beginning of the month inventory levels is another important element of 6-month merchandise plan. Take a look at this table. It provides an estimated sales for the period January to June. This table gives an example of how to create a 6-month merchandise plan. Step 3 deals with the purpose of open to buy. Depending on the sales for the month and the reductions, the merchandise buying can be adjusted. This helps in maintaining the planned relation between the stock and the sales. Open to buy ensures that the buyer limits overbuying and underbuying, prevents loss of sales due to unavailability of required stock, maintains purchases within the budgeted limits, reduces markdowns which may arise due to excess buying. To calculate the open to buy is equal to planned EOM stock minus projected EOM stock. Open to buy is always calculated from current and future periods. There are 9 steps to complete 6-month merchandise plan. They are: assemble last year figures, planned sales, planned reductions, BOM and EOM planned inventory levels, inventory stock turns, gross margin return on inventory investment, planned purchases, planned markup, gross margin. Step 1. Assemble and fill in last year's results. Unless your operation is computerized, however, getting most of the monthly data for your plan will be impossible. In such cases, simply begin with 6-month or even annual figures. Then divide by the relevant number of months. or just take an educated guess. The more times you do this, the sooner you will develop systems to extract these numbers on a monthly basis. Step 2, Planned sales. Sales planning is the most difficult step in the whole process. It would be great if you could purchase a retailer's crystal ball and sales forecast would miraculously appear after rubbing it with a cash register tape. In the real world, however, we start by reviewing last year's figures and trying to determine what might affect our performance this year. Some things to consider are sales performance coming into the season. What percentage increase or decrease is the class, department or total store expecting coming into the season compared to the previous year? There is no guarantee that it will continue, but if sales are up to 15% over last year and the new season is only 3 months away, you may be more optimistic than pessimistic in your forecasting. Monthly promotions. Planning your promotions at least 6 months in advance will be necessary if you hope to have an effect on performance. A promotional philosophy followed by too many retailers is to run 2 clearance sale ads per year, and if sales are soft, they might run another ad, or this may have been acceptable in the boom years. But a seat of the pants approach like this is a recipe for disaster in today's environment. Advertising and promotion suggests a number of promotional strategies, one of which is to promote in periods when sales and margins are strong. Example, back to school, Christmas and Mother's Day, etc. How are the customers changing? This has more impact on planning at the class level and is more noticeable in the areas of fashion. Are there new styles or markets that pose either an opportunity or a threat to this class of merchandise? Consider the case of family shoe store where the western boots as a class was expanding. This style trend will obviously affect our buying plan. Other demographic changes that may affect our buying include the baby boomer trends. Example, they are aging, saving more, spending less, putting on weight, etc. Then economic factors. Unemployment rates, interest rates, dollar value fluctuations and inflation may all have an effect on buyer's crystal ball. If these factors are creating economic drag on our customers, there will be certainly an effect on what they purchase from us. You may have to move price points down, source new suppliers, or even adjust your forecasts. Then planned reductions, markdowns, employee discounts, and inventory shrinkage come under the heading of planned reductions. These 3 figures affect our and gross margin. So, they must be considered when calculating department and class profitability. Since they also affect inventory levels, they must be projected to ensure enough merchandise is on hand to attain forecasted sale levels. Taking any markdown is a difficult task for most retailers to face. Shoddy merchandise and bad weather are factors that may be out of retailers' control. However, the buyer must start by analyzing last year's markdown numbers very closely. Some factors to consider are markdowns as a percentage of sales by month. How aggressive are this year's pricing policies? When did we promote last year and how will it change? How were deliveries last year and Did they affect our markdowns? As a percentage of sales, this figure remains relatively constant from one year to the next, unless company policy changes. Therefore, it is then safe to use last year dollar figure as a percentage of sales and apply it to the sales projections for the current period. The retailers need to calculate the shrink percentage from past experiences. Like employee discounts, the acceptable method of calculating shrinkage dollar amount per month is to use the last year shrink percent multiplied by the monthly sales projection. Then BOM and EOM, planned inventory levels. Planning end of the month or beginning of the month inventory levels. 1 month's ending is the next month's beginning. So it is another important element of 6 months merchandise plan. Inventory is by far the number one dollar asset within the company, and careful planning is required to ensure an adequate return on investment is attained. The stock to sales method is a popular way to forecast how much inventory is required to attain monthly sales projections. Stock to sales is a ratio of amount of inventory on hand at a particular date to the sales for the same period. It is calculated as follows. Stock to sales ratio is equal to stock on hand EOM at retail value upon sales for the same month. When using the stock to sales method for planning stock levels, buyer selects stock to sales ratios that he desires each month. Desired stock to sales ratios are usually obtained by referring previous seasons. The selected ratio is then multiplied by the projected period sales to get the desired EOM inventory levels. The stock to sales ratio also provides you with an estimate of what your inventory turnover will be. Then inventory stock turns. Inventory stock turns measure the rate at which the merchandise is sold from your store compared to the inventory level on hand. The higher the rate, the more profit the buyer brings to the company, and the better cash flow will be there. Stock turns are calculated by dividing the total sales for the season by season's average ending inventory at retail value. Season's average inventory is equal to sum of EOM inventory upon months in season. Stock turn rate is equal to total sales for the season upon season average inventory. Then we have gross margin return on inventory investment. While the standard inventory turnover ratio tells us how efficiently you are moving your inventory, it ignores the profitability of the inventory movement. For example, an item with a low gross margin and high sales will show a higher turnover rate. However, this obviously is not as desirable as a moving inventory with higher or even average gross margins. Basically, it produces a lot of activity but with fewer financial results. Gross margin return on inventory investment has become the standard inventory statistic for many retailers because it reflects the movement of inventory relative to profitability rather than to sales. This is a better measure of inventory performance because retailers are more interested in profitability than sales. Then we have planned purchases. Once sales projections, stock reductions and stock levels have been established, you can calculate your planned purchases. The planned purchases figure is also the buyer's first open to buy estimate. Using the August figures from the sample 6 months plan, the formula for planned purchases is as follows. Planned purchases is equal to EOM inventory plus sales plus reductions minus BOM inventory. Then we have planned markup. After calculating how much inventory to purchase, retailers must determine the initial markup for these goods. This may fluctuate between different classes of goods within a department. The original markup must allow for a final profit after paying all operating costs, reductions, cost of goods, etc. Most retailers have a target markup they want to start with. This markup percentage is calculated by dividing the markup in dollars by the retail price. Markup dollars is the difference between the cost price and the selling price. That is, our shoe store buys men's slippers for $10 and follows the manufacturer's suggested retail of $20, which is a 50% markup percentage. Markup dollars is equal to selling price minus cost price. Then we have gross margin. Gross margin is the difference between selling price and the cost of the product, less reductions for markdowns, shrinkage and employee discounts. Hopefully, what is left after these reductions is enough to pay all operating expenses and leave the retailer with a profit. In our 6-month plan, we work in the retail dollars. To determine the gross margin for each month, all purchases and inventories must be converted to cost price. Using our family shoe store illustration, note that the price. Using our family shoe store illustration, note that we have a 50% markup on all our goods. To calculate the cost price, multiply the inventories and purchases by the original markup percentage, in this case 50%. For example, using the month of August from the 6-month plan, we must first convert to cost figures by multiplying open or closing inventories and purchases by 50%. Finally, we determined planned gross margin like this. Planned gross margin is equal to period sales minus COGS, that is cost of goods sold, upon period sales. Preparing a seasonal merchandise plan makes the critical task of buying that much easier. This is no different from the need for an architect to design a house before he starts building it. During this process, remember to follow these key suggestions. Become proficient, if you are not already, in the use of computerized spreadsheet program. Begin with a higher original markups so your first markdowns can be meaningful without killing gross margin. Plan some markdowns for each of the month as you offer some in-store specials for sale only buyer. Become proficient at performing physical inventory counts so you can obtain accurate figures at least 4 times per year. You have come to the end of this unit. To summarize, in this unit you have learnt about 6-month planning process and open to buy planning systems. Thank you.